As Israel continues to ramp up its ground offensive in Gaza, Hamas has said that it will release a number of foreign captives in the coming days. The group plans to release some non-Israeli hostages out of the 240 people they have been holding. In a video statement, the spokesperson of Hamas's armed wing, Al-Qassam Brigade, said the release had been arranged through mediation by some countries that he did not name. He also did not reveal the number of captives or their nationalities, but said the group no longer had the desire to keep them.
Some countries have stepped in through intermediaries to release some of the detainees in Gaza who are of foreign nationality. We received the requests of these countries. We have therefore informed the mediators that we will release a number of foreigners in the coming days in line with our position stated earlier about our lack of desire or need to keep them or continue holding them in Gaza.
The spokesperson also denied that a hostage freed by Israel had been in Hamas's hands, saying a number of captives were being held by other militant groups in Gaza. The statement came after Israel's military said an Israeli soldier, Ori Megidish, was freed in Gaza during a ground operation.
The nation of Israel is here. We're grateful to everyone for the prayers and support. Our Ori is back home, and now the prayers are with the rest of the beloved captives, and our hearts are with all the families.
Remember, Hamas has so far released 4 hostages, but this was the first successful rescue in weeks since the war began. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that recovering the hostages is an integral part of the military's goals, but he has rejected calls for a ceasefire. Meanwhile, the White House has said that a humanitarian pause could be of value in the effort to get the hostages out.
The goal would be to get aid in, to maybe get people out that want to evacuate. It also would be valuable, a humanitarian pause every now and then would be valuable for us if in fact there is a serious effort to get hostages out, because you'd need some kind of pause of the fighting to be able to do that safely.
Qatar and Egypt have also continued with negotiation efforts, urging Israel to enable emergency aid deliveries. The Qatari Prime Minister told Thailand's visiting foreign minister that efforts are ongoing to secure the release of hostages, including the 22 Thai nationals held by Hamas. Meanwhile, families of Israeli hostages gathered in Tel Aviv on Tuesday, carrying photographs of their loved ones. They say they have been worried since the military stepped up its ground assault inside Gaza. Some even carried signs calling for a ceasefire. Relatives of hostages also took to the streets of Paris, calling for the French government's help in securing their release.
They are a terror organization, and with terror organization you don't give and take. And the situation right now with the horrifying things they've done in Israel has to be, first of all, release all the hostages, and then everything else. I don't know what the Israeli authorities will decide, but I do know that we can't expect to negotiate with Hamas. And as far, it's not something that we know. We have no information about negotiation. And I do believe that the world shouldn't expect anything in return of bringing the hostages back home.
Joining us on the broadcast from Birmingham is Scott Lucas, Professor of International Politics, Clinton Institute, University College Dublin. Professor, welcome to WION World is One.
Thank you for having me here.
My first question, Hamas says they will release foreign hostages. Is this a result of the Mossad chief and his meeting in Qatar?
Well, the talks have been going on in Qatar since soon after Hamas seized the hostages on October the 7th. And the Mossad chief being there is perhaps part of the dynamic. But I think if you look at the wider context, I would be very surprised if we get a large number of hostages being released anytime soon. It is true that with the Israeli ground offensive, that the value of the hostages as a bargaining chip, some might say human shields, is gone. Hamas was holding the hostages in part to deter Israel from taking that ground offensive. They also were trying to use them to get Palestinians to be freed from Israeli detention. Now that's gone. But the question is, why would Hamas release the hostages? They could release the hostages as a sign to the world, which is, look, we're the good guys here. We're the ones being attacked by the Israelis. They have, as you mentioned, released 4 hostages, but only 4 in an attempt to show that they are exerting goodwill. But I think the fundamental is what the American spokesman said, and that is in a situation where you're talking about an expansion of the war with the Israeli bombing and the Israeli ground offensive, you don't have the conditions to release the hostages. You don't have the space to release the hostages because the primary goal of Hamas is to defend itself.
Right, Professor, there's also a lot of condemnation of Israel for its aggression in Gaza. Even Qatar, in fact, has warned against Israeli aggression. Is Netanyahu risking alienating allies?
I think it's very interesting you pick up on that Qatar statement because, of course, they're central to negotiating the release of the hostages. And part of the reason why they condemned the latest Israeli attacks, including the bombing of the Jabalia refugee camp that killed scores of civilians, as well as possibly Hamas fighters, was to say, look, you're jeopardizing this. You're risking this. I think Netanyahu is risking all of it, Israel's alliances, because almost all of the international community that's gone to Israel, the U.S., the Europeans, the Canadians, the Australians, the Japanese, as well as Arab states have been saying, don't expand this. Don't send the ground offensive in. But I'm going to say something which is a bit of cold reality, and I hate to tell your viewers this. Netanyahu at this point doesn't care about those alliances. And indeed, I don't think Netanyahu and his war cabinet care about the fate of the hostages.
Right. In fact, Professor, as we speak, there's an update coming in. Hamas says that 7 hostages, including 3 foreign passport holders, were killed in Israel's bombing of Gaza's largest refugee camp. How do you respond to that?
Well, Hamas has claimed, again, as throughout the past 2 weeks, that hostages have been killed, and we simply don't know. It's in Hamas's interest to say, look, you're killing hostages. You need to stop this. We'll only know this, I'm afraid, once we have either a humanitarian pause or what's more likely, just complete devastation. What I can tell you is this, and that is that Benjamin Netanyahu and the war cabinet have made their decision. Their overriding goal is, quote, to destroy Hamas. And any civilians and any hostages who get killed, those are acceptable losses if Hamas is destroyed. The cold reality now is that the civilians and the hostages have become expendable both for Hamas and for the Israeli leadership.
Right, that's certainly a very tragic cold reality. But we're talking about a humanitarian pause at a time when the Houthi rebels are also involved. Is this becoming a wider, more dangerous regional conflict, in your view?
Yes, and it's always had the potential to become more dangerous. I don't think it's become more dangerous in that we suddenly have a 2-front war or a 3-front war. And the reason why I say this is that take Lebanon's Hezbollah, which has been skirmishing with the Israelis. I think it's risky for them, given the precarious state of Lebanon, to get into a war. I think it's precarious for Iran, which is the backer of Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, to risk a regional war, given its own economic position right now and its shaky political position. But the way that we get an expansion of the war isn't a sudden decision to expand it just like that. It's through incremental actions. And with Iranian-led militias attacking U.S. personnel in Iraq and in Syria, and now with the Houthis firing missiles, lobbing them to try to hit Israel, you have that type of gradual escalation that could spread this into a war, a wider war that nobody really wants beyond Israel and Gaza.
Absolutely. Professor, thank you so much for all that analysis, and thanks for joining us on WION World is One.
Thanks to you and your viewers.
WION World is One is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.